Hi guys, this is your girl Wakeji Kamore and welcome to Reflections by Wakeji Kamore. We are on the last chapter of the book of Nehemiah. We are on chapter 13. Kama kawaida, please read this chapter for yourself. Please pause this recording. Be obedient. Be an obedient child of God. And just read the chapter for yourself or, listen to the Bible audio just so that you understand what's happening in the chapter. You understand, so that when I'm sharing my summary and I'm sharing my takeouts, you're not wondering, what is this girl talking about? Yeah, so please read the chapter, understand it, then you can come and listen to the summary and the takeouts that I have from this chapter. This chapter has loads and loads and loads to teach us. It has so many lessons, honestly, it does. And I'm just going to just give you like a summary of what's happening in this chapter. So we are just being shown at how much the people of Israel have regressed because Nehemiah has been away. So Nehemiah has been away in this chapter. We're being told that he went back to serve the king of Persia. Remember, you guys, in Nehemiah chapter 2, when he was talking to the king, and the king asked him, how long is it going to take for you to go back to Jerusalem and build that wall? He gave a specific time. And so Nehemiah was a good person because he actually gave a specific time. He went to Jerusalem, became a governor there, he built the wall, and he came back because he was an honorable man and he had given his word and he wanted to be a man of his word. So he went back to the king to serve the king. Only that this time around he had gone to ask for permission to completely leave and move to Jerusalem for good. But he kept his word and went back, just like as he had promised the king. Remember that the journey from Persia to Jerusalem had taken them 4 months. So you can imagine if it had taken 4 months for Nehemiah to go back from Jerusalem to Persia, and also the trip from Persia to Jerusalem. That's like 8 months. That's 8 travel months. And we're not told how long he stayed in Persia, because probably he stayed there for like 2 months. Who knows? I don't know what time he stayed there. But in this, let's say, minimum of 8 months, there was a lot of regression. Like, people really regressed in all the areas that they have improved in places where they were supposed not they were not supposed to associate themselves with foreigners. They disrespected the Sabbath. They started now associating with the Ammonites, and there was a clear law that had said that the Ammonites should not be allowed to join in the meetings that were, like godly meetings. So that's just basically what's happening. And Nehemiah comes back and he finds that these people have really regressed. These people have really started doing all the wrong things. And he's like, almost chapping people to go back to the correct way of doing things. And that's basically what's happening in this chapter. One of the things that had happened is that there's this high priest, the priest in charge. He wasn't the high priest. He was a priest in charge of the storerooms, and these were storerooms in the temple of God. And these storerooms were supposed to be used to keep the tenth of the grain, the tithe that people would give, the new wine, the oil for the Levites and for the singers and the gatekeepers, and they were supposed to be kept in that room. But this guy called Eliashib was the priest who was in charge for the storerooms, was a friend to Tobiah. Please, guys, let me refresh your mind on who Tobiah is so that you understand how this friendship shouldn't have existed to begin with. Tobiah was, remember when Nehemiah was starting to build the wall, there was a guy called Sanballat and Tobiah. These two guys are Ammonites. These two guys were against even the wall of Jericho being built. There are same ones that were saying, sasa hizi ni walls gani wanajenga, even a fox can pass by here and this thing will crumble. They made fun of their building skills. They harassed them, they discouraged them, they said they would attack them. So they were really against everything that was being done for the sake and the glory of God, the God of Israelites. So we don't understand how Eliashib, who is the priest in charge of the storerooms, became friends with Tobiah. Like, how are you friends with this person who was so against this thing being built? How are you friends with this guy? And you see Tosha being friends. You have cleared the storeroom. You have cleared all the things that used to be in the storeroom, and you've given this place, like, almost this guy this luxury suit in the temple. It's not a see in the marketplace. Inside the temple is where Tobiah is sitting. He sits inside the temple. It's like now he has like an office inside the temple. So that was just like wrong, because first, this is a guy who was against the building of, even the temple, against building of the wall, and second, that he was an Ammonite. And if you look at verse 1, it says that they found this written in the law, that no Ammonite or Moabite would be permitted to join the meetings with God. This law was written because these people didn't give the Israelites food and water, and they paid Balaam. Balaam was a false prophet. They paid Balaam to curse the Israelites, but our God changed the curse and made it a blessing, because God really loved the Israelites. So when the Israelites had this law, they decided to obey it, and they separated themselves from the people who were descendants of the foreigners. But as you can see, Eliashib did not do that. If you want to read this story about what happened to the Moabites and why God said they shouldn't be in the meetings of God, you can find that story in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 23, verse 3 to 5. It's actually, just read the whole of Deuteronomy chapter 23. You'll find that story there about Balaam, how he wanted to come and curse the Israelites, but God allowed, alikuwa anaongea tu blessings badala ya kuongea curses. How crazy is that? And how crazy beautiful is that? So one of the things that I learned from this is that you cannot be friends with the enemy, and you cannot be friends with sin and think that sin will not take over. Sin spreads. It grows. It's like mold. You cannot entertain sin and think that you're going to just be okay, that nothing is going to happen to you, that we'll go too sour. That can never be. You'll be lying to yourself if you think that is possible, that you can be able to sit with sin, you can be able to, to be like in the middle of whether I serve God or I don't serve God. You cannot be that, because sin will grow. Sin will yoke you. And that is why in the Bible it says that, in the New Testament it says that we cannot be equally, and you cannot be yoked with you cannot be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. No, we are not to be unequally yoked with unbelievers. And it's not to say that there is no space for unbelievers to believe in God and to turn around and to be welcome into the kingdom. That space is there. But you cannot be with an unbeliever who is not changing, and they are going to remain an unbeliever, and think that you are not going to be influenced, and think that everything with you is going to remain all right. So that's just one of the things that I learned from this chapter. That just because this Eliashib guy allowed this guy to even be in the storeroom, it shows that, Jerusalem was just in a state. I'm like, hata watu hawapeani tithe ama vitu zenye zinapeanwa zilikuwa zinawekwa wapi? Why were they even being put? And anyway, we see that this was happening because Jerusalem, and Nehemiah had gone back to king of Babylon. He went back to the Artaxerxes, who was the king in Babylon later, and he was there to ask for proper permission to go back to Jerusalem. So he came back to Jerusalem. He heard about all the sad things that Eliashib had done, and so that he had given a room in the temple to Tobiah, and so he was very angry. Nehemiah was very angry, and he went there and he threw out all Tobiah's things out of the room. Shoo, toka nje na mavitu zako. And then he gave the commands for the rooms to be made pure and clean, and for all the temple dishes and all the things and all the grain offerings and all the incense to be put back into the rooms. I'm like, what agreement is this you've made with this guy unampatia room kwa temple? Kwanza, is it even your house? Why are you giving up space in God's house? I'm like, oh gosh. Anyways, Nehemiah also heard about how people had not given the Levites their shares. So that means that these guys were not even giving tithe anymore. They were not giving their first fruits. They were not giving the things that they had initially started giving. And the singers, so the Levites and the singers had gone back to work in their own fields. Because if people are not building the temple, people are not giving to churches, then the preachers and the priests will go and start doing other biashara so they can feed their family. Because at the end of the day, they do have families to feed. So Nehemiah was asking, why are you not taking care of God's temple? And so he called all the Levites together and told them to go back to their places and duties in the temple. Then everyone in Judah brought the tenth of their grains, their new wine, their oil to the temple, and these things were put in the storeroom. And then the other thing that Nehemiah did is that he put different people in charge of the storeroom. Of course, alitoa huyo Elishab, ni kama mambo yake haikukuwa mzuri kwa sababu clearly if he's made friends with the Ammonite, ni kama mambo yako haitarekebishika. So anyway, he gave it to Shelemiah, the priest, Zadok, the teacher, and a Levite named Pedaiah. I think one of the things that I like about these men that have been put in charge of the storerooms, first, it's not one person. So that means it can't be just one person who decides, okay, me, I have a friend called Tobiah, wacha akuja achukue hizi storerooms. And then also, it wasn't just one category of people. It was a priest, Shelemiah the priest, Zadok a teacher, and a Levite named Pedaiah. So there was a priest, there was a teacher, and there was a Levite. Not just one person. And one of the things that he did, he also made Hanan, son of Zakur, he made him the helper. And he said that he selected these people that because he could trust them, that they were responsible in giving the supplies to the supplies to the Levites and the other people that needed to be given. And then the other thing that Nehemiah noticed when he came back is that the people were working on Sabbath day. He says that he saw people pressing grapes to make wine. He saw people bringing in grain and loading it on donkeys. He saw people carrying grapes and figs and all kinds of things into the city. And they were bringing all these things into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. So he warned them about this, and he told them that they must not sell food on the Sabbath day. And then he saw that there were some men from the city of Tyre living in Jerusalem. They were bringing fish and all kinds of things into Jerusalem and selling them on the Sabbath day. And the Jews were buying them. So he told the important people of Judah that they were wrong. He told them what they were doing was very bad and they were ruining the Sabbath day. And so what he did was he asked that the gates be closed every Friday evening, just before dark, that he commanded that the gatekeepers to shut down and to lock the gates of Jerusalem so that nobody could come in on Friday night and nobody could come in on Saturday night to start doing these things on Sabbath. And actually, it was so bad that one or two times the traders and the merchants had to stay outside the Jerusalem the whole night, because he had said them, amutaingia hapa Jerusalem, so that you can start selling things on Sabbath. And so over time they just stopped coming. The merchants stopped coming, the traders stopped coming, because they realized huku nafungangwa Friday saa 11, so you cannot be here to sell things. And then the other thing that Nehemiah did is that he commanded the Levites to make themselves pure, because they were to guard the gates, and this was to be done on the Sabbath day, so that the Sabbath day can be kept holy. One of the other things that Nehemiah noticed that had happened in his absence is that some of the Jewish men had married women from other countries of Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. And this was like super, super wrong, because the Moabites and the Ammonites and the Ashdods were idol worshippers. And so if they were going to be marrying people from those nations, it means that they were going to be influenced to start worshipping their God. And they had seen a perfect example from King Solomon, all the way from King Solomon, who married women from different foreign countries, and that did not end well. So he says that he told them that what they were doing is wrong. He says half of the children from those marriages did not even know how to speak the Jewish language. They spoke the foreign languages. The foreign languages of Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. So he told them that what they were doing was wrong. It says actually he hit some of them, he pulled out their hair, and he forced them to make a promise in God's name. And he said that they must not marry their daughters to these foreigners, and they must not let their daughters marry the sons of these foreigners. And so, of course, they made that that covenant. And it almost looks like they were being forced, because say Nehemiah and our chapa and pulled out their hair. I'm like, oh my God, this sounds so forceful. Sounds like such a forceful way to make someone believe or someone obey. But that is just even how he had to do it. And he says that, even Solomon made this sin was made to sin because of the foreign women. And now what they were doing was just exactly what Solomon had done and did not end well. All right, so another thing that we see happening in this chapter is that Sanballat was forced to leave this place. Is it Sanballat? It says Joiada was the son of Elishab, the high priest. Oh God, Elishab was actually the high priest, not just a priest, the high priest. And one of Joiada's son was the son-in-law from Sanballat from Horon. I forced him to leave this place and I forced him to run away. Yani, Nehemiah was so determined to make sure that, this friendship with the Moabites and the Ammonites would completely be finished. So he actually is chasing away even people away from Jerusalem. And he says, my God, please punish these people. They make the priesthood unclean. They treat it as if it was not important. They did not obey the agreements that they made with the priests and the Levites. And so he says that he made the priests and the Levites clean and pure. And he took away all the foreigners and all the strange things that they taught. And he gave the Levites and the priests their own duties and responsibilities. And he made sure that they would bring gifts of wood and first parts of their harvest at the right time. And then he asks God to remember him for all the good things that he has done. And that is where the book ends. One of the things that I learned from this is that it seems that all the things that the Israelites had made progress on since Nehemiah had come back, since Ezra had come back, were the same things that they regressed on when Nehemiah was away. When he looks at marrying foreign women and intermarrying with foreign countries and nations. They had also stopped. At some point, they had stopped doing that. They had started giving their first fruits, giving their tithes, just so that the Levites could come back into the city, come back into the temple and work and do the work for the Lord. But they also stopped doing that when Nehemiah was away. They had started respecting the Sabbath day when Nehemiah was here. But when Nehemiah went back to Babylon, just so that he could let things be straight and clear with his king, they regressed and they started selling things, they started working on Sabbath. So all the things that they had made progress on when Nehemiah was around are the same things that they regressed on. And so something that I learned from this is it's almost as if they didn't have their own, they had made some amazing revivals. These people were eager to learn the word of God. They had radically obeyed and changed their lives, both individual and also as a nation. But something happened and they regressed. It's like backsliding is shown in every area that they had made progress, including separation from the foreigners, as I had mentioned, ungodly influences, respecting the Sabbath, and providing for the Levites, of course, through the tithes. And what can we learn from this? We see that it's important. We see the importance of a strong, motivated spiritual leader, because they were being radically obedient because of this strong, motivated leader. It seems as if Nehemiah was largely behind these changes. Though there were revivals, they were short-lived because people did not sustain it on their own. It seems as if their obedience was caused part of an external pressure from Nehemiah. It's like almost Nehemiah was forcing these people to do this, or at least strongly encouraging them to obey God's word, on God's law. But when he left, the external forces keeping them accountable was removed. And so once again, they were free to indulge themselves and in today's world, we often see this happening as well. One of the clearest examples is children who grew up in believing families. When they were young, they went to church every week, they memorized scripture, they joined church and service projects, and they served in churches, and they did all these things when they were younger. But when they grow up, when they graduate from high school, when they graduate from campus, or when they go to campus, they just disappear. So what happens? What happened to their relationship with Christ? It would seem that relationship did not exist to start with. So how can we avoid similar mistakes? How can we keep serving God over the long term? We need to start by evaluating ourselves and our motivations. We need to consider why we go to church, why we study the Bible, or why we go to fellowship. Is it because of some external factor? Why do you read the word of God? Why do you listen to even this Bible summary? Why do you do? Is this an external factor? If so, then our motivation is not pure. And when that external factor is removed, our lack of genuine relationship with God will be exposed. Beyond that, we need to develop a stronger personal relationship with God. We need to know God for ourselves. We need to learn who God is for ourselves. We need to have a personal relationship with ourselves that is not determined by an external force, that is not determined by a parent, that is not determined by a pastor, that is not determined by your friends. You need to have your own personal relationship with God. The advantages to Christian fellowship, which is why God established the church. At the same time, we must have the right motivation for serving God. If you make progress, don't get prideful. Don't get complacent. Forget what is behind and push on toward what is ahead. For me, I think the thing that I pick up from this is to have your own personal conviction as to why you're doing something. It's not because someone is pushing you to do it. It's not because someone is asking you to do it, but just having your own personal conviction as to why you're obedient to the law of God. Having your own personal conviction as to why you don't lie. Having your own personal conviction as to why you don't have sex before marriage. Having your own personal conviction as to why you don't go around getting drunk. And have your own personal conviction, because if that conviction is attached to someone else, when that person is not there, there's a high possibility that that conviction will go with that person, and then you'll be left now hauna hata identity, hauna mbele wala nyuma. So I think that's some of the things that I learned from this chapter. Number one, you cannot be friends with sin and think that sin will not grow. Sin will grow. Sin permeates. Sin just likes to spread. You can't contain sin. You cannot contain sin. Sin is not something that you can contain. So do not even try to contain it. The other thing that I learned from this chapter, again, is just that you need to have your own personal convictions and personal relationship with God. If you are going to sustain the relationship that you have with God, the commitment that you have with God, the commitment to reading His Word, to obeying it, and to doing the things that God asks of us. Thank you so much for listening. I really do appreciate you guys listening through the book of Nehemiah. I'm going to do an overview of the book of Nehemiah next, and then after that we are going to start the book of Esther. So please just stay tuned. Esther is a really interesting book, and I'm really excited about the book of Esther. Also just because it's a girl's book. It's a girly book. Anyway, so yeah, I'm excited about that. But before we jump into the book of Esther, we are going to be doing an overview of the book of Nehemiah. So stay tuned, and thank you so much for listening. Today, I know it's long, but it is worth it.